I still remember the night I locked myself in my dorm room. Tears running down my face, heart pounding in terror. I couldn't believe that the man I once admired, a mentor I trusted, had become my worst nightmare. My name is Cindy, and I'm 17 years old. I'm a proud African-American girl from a humble background in Chicago, Illinois. I had just finished high school, and against all odds, I crushed it. My parents were beyond proud. They had sacrificed so much for me and my 4 siblings. College was my dream, and after 3 years of hard work, I received scholarship offers from 2 prestigious universities. UCLA in California offered me a full scholarship, while Columbia in New York offered a scholarship for a semester only. At home, my parents couldn't agree on where I should go. My mother, Nina, argued for UCLA, where everything would be covered, while my father, Albert, insisted on Columbia. He wanted me to stay close, not too far from home and under his watchful eye. One evening at dinner, I recall my father saying,
"New York is still manageable, Nina. California is too far. If anything happens, we won't be able to get to her in time."
My mother protested.
"But Albert, Columbia only covers 1 semester. How will we pay for the rest of her tuition? UCLA is a full ride."
He replied firmly.
"I'll find a way. Columbia is Ivy League. It will open more opportunities for her."
Torn between my own wishes and not wanting to disappoint my father, I chose Columbia and packed my bags for New York. Columbia was breathtaking. My first semester whirled by as I strove to prove that I'd made the right choice. The campus was grand, the students ambitious, and the professors distinguished. One professor particularly stood out. Professor Gill, my public law teacher. At 45, he was a successful lawyer with years of experience. He was respected, married, and known for mentoring promising students. In our early interactions, he praised my work, offered advice, and even invited me to his office hours to discuss my future. To me, he was more than just a teacher. He was like a father figure. But gradually, things began to change. At first, it was the subtle signals, a lingering glance here, a hand that rested on my shoulder for just a moment too long. Then his compliments became unnervingly personal. One afternoon after class, I remember him saying,
"You're an exceptional student, Cindy. Not just intelligent, but beautiful. That combination will take you far."
I laughed it off, but the intensity in his eyes made me uneasy. Soon came further invitations.
"You should come by my house this weekend. I can introduce you to some influential people in the field. It would be great for your career."
I politely declined, yet he persisted. The turning point came one evening in his office. I recall hesitantly asking, "Professor Gill, you wanted to see me?" He replied with a smooth tone,
"Yes, Cindy. Please, have a seat."
As I sat, he moved closer, and in that moment I felt utterly trapped. My heart raced and my mind screamed that something terrible was underway. I mustered the courage to say, "Professor, I don't think this is appropriate. I need to leave." His voice, laced with false reassurance, came back.
"Cindy, don't be so hasty. I'm only trying to help you."
I stood up, my hands trembling, and hurried out of his office. That night, locked in my dorm room, I was haunted by fear and confusion. From that moment on, I became hyper-vigilant, praying never to meet him again. I stopped attending his lectures, and I even learned that he had asked a few of his assistants to keep an eye on me. One Wednesday afternoon in a school corridor, I found myself face to face with Professor Gill again. He approached, asking in a tone that seemed oddly detached,
"Cindy, how are you doing? Why haven't I seen you in my lectures lately?"
My heart raced, my palms sweated, and I felt completely isolated. Just as he continued his questioning, my classmate Maria, a composed European student with striking blonde hair, who was a few years older than I, stepped in and greeted him, saying,
"Good afternoon, Professor Gill."
Her simple words broke the tension, and as he turned his attention to her, I seized the chance to vanish into the bright glass corridor. In the weeks that followed, I sank into isolation and depression. My academic performance suffered terribly. Every lecture reminded me of that terrible office encounter, and I could no longer focus. My grades, once a source of pride, began slipping away. I stopped confiding in my parents. What could I possibly tell them? That their little girl, their pride, was failing at college because she was being harassed. Then came the final blow. My semester results. I failed. Not just one subject, but nearly everything. The moment I saw my scores online, my world seemed to shatter. I was terrified of facing my parents, especially knowing how hard my father had fought for me to be at Columbia. A few days later, I traveled back to Chicago. My mother met me at the airport, her face etched with concern as she whispered,
We'll figure this out, baby.
At home, the tension was palpable at the dinner table. My father's disappointment was almost unbearable. Finally, he demanded,
Cindy, what happened? You had everything you needed to succeed.
I looked down, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't focus, Dad. Things got complicated.
Complicated? Do you know how much we sacrificed for you? This was your chance, and you threw it away.
He repeated the word with rising frustration. Tears welled up in my eyes until I finally blurted out, Professor Gill, he harassed me. Silence fell. My father's expression hardened and my mother gasped, clinging to my hand.
What did you just say?
My father demanded in a trembling whisper. I took a shaky breath. He made me feel unsafe. He cornered me, made comments, tried to. I couldn't handle it. That's why I stopped going to his class. My mother pulled me close and soon all three of us wept, mourning not only the lost opportunity but the betrayal of trust. Later that night, I slept in my siblings' room, feeling a small measure of comfort even as I feared what the future held. The very next morning, determined to get answers, my parents drove me back to Columbia. We went straight to the administration, and soon we were in the dean's office. I'll never forget the solemn tone of the dean as he began.
I am horrified by what I'm hearing. Professor Gill will be summoned immediately.
Shortly after, Professor Gill entered with an unruffled expression. In a calm tone, he said,
This is a misunderstanding. I have never acted inappropriately with any student.
Misunderstanding? How can you call this a misunderstanding when you've terrorized my daughter? I sent Cindy to Columbia so she could thrive, not to be preyed upon by someone she was meant to trust.
Professor Gill's calm faltered slightly as he replied,
Mr. Albert, my intentions were solely to guide Cindy toward a successful future. Everything I did was within the boundaries of professional conduct.
My father slammed his hand on the desk, his voice rising.
Professional conduct. Your actions, unwanted touches, lingering glances, and coercive invitations speak a different truth. How do you explain that, Professor?
I could no longer remain silent. My voice trembled as I confronted him. Professor Gill, I trusted you. I believed you were a mentor who cared about my future. But in your office that day, I felt violated and completely unsafe. How can you say it was just guidance when I was left trapped? For a moment, his tone softened.
Cindy, I never intended to make you feel that way. My words and actions were meant to encourage you, not intimidate you. Sometimes, in the passion of mentorship, intentions are misinterpreted.
I couldn't hold back my tears as I responded. Encouragement? It felt like exploitation. I was scared and utterly alone.
Your so-called encouragement nearly ruined my future. My father's anger deepened as he interjected.
Your excuses mean nothing. My daughter suffered, and we demand accountability. How do you justify actions that clearly crossed every line?
Professor Gill leaned forward, trying to regain control.
I understand your anger, Mr. Albert, and I regret that Cindy feels harm. I insist that every step I took was for her benefit. The evidence will show that my conduct was merely misunderstood. I have been teaching in this institution for over a decade and never had any inappropriate behavior toward a student. I am a well-respected member of the court, the community, and this institution. I can't take such allegations.
After that explosive confrontation, as we left the dean's office, the room was heavy with silence. The dean, clearly burdened by the weight of the situation, addressed everyone as we departed.
Thank you for your honesty today. I promise a thorough investigation will be launched immediately.
Later that day, to prevent any scandal and restore trust, the dean convened a campus-wide meeting in the main hall. The room was filled with anxious faculty, staff, and students. Standing at the podium, the dean said,
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering on such short notice. I am here to address the serious allegations against Professor Gill. An investigation is now in progress. Your safety is our utmost priority, and I need your help to set things right.
A brave voice emerged from the back. Miss Johnson, a female staff member, spoke up.
Dean, I've noticed Professor Gill behaving inappropriately during meetings and around several female students. I have notes on these occurrences and am willing to share them.
The dean nodded gravely.
Thank you, Miss Johnson. Every piece of evidence will be taken seriously. I urge anyone else who has witnessed suspicious behavior to step forward.
A ripple of murmurs swept through the audience until another voice, steady and resolute, came from among the students. My classmate Maria stood and said,
I want to share something that happened recently. I was in the corridor near Professor Gill's office when I saw Cindy being cornered. I heard him murmur, "You have so much potential, but you need to trust me," and I saw the fear in Cindy's eyes. That day, I knew something was terribly wrong.
Another student, Lisa, added.
In one lecture, he remarked, "A strong woman like you should command respect both inside and outside the courtroom." That backhanded compliment left me uneasy every time I thought about it.
The dean leaned forward, his voice firm yet compassionate.
Your testimonies are invaluable. I want everyone to know. If you have experienced or witnessed any behavior that compromises your dignity or safety, my door is always open. We will protect this community, and no detail is too small.
In the days that followed, the dean's office became a hub for courageous voices. One afternoon, as the dean reviewed newly gathered testimonies, there was a gentle knock on his door. Ms. Ramirez, a concerned staff member, entered softly, saying,
"Dean, may I come in? I have additional information that I believe is crucial."
Gesturing to a chair, the dean replied,
Of course, Ms. Ramirez Dotto. Please share what you've observed.
She explained.
I've noticed that after classes, Professor Gill would often linger longer than appropriate. I overheard him remarking about a student's natural charm and how it would open doors for her if she let me guide her. Comments completely out of line for someone in his position.
The dean scribbled notes and said,
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Your account adds to a pattern we can no longer ignore. Every testimony is critical to our comprehensive investigation.
A few days later, Maria returned for a follow-up conversation. With determination in her eyes, she confided,
Dean, the incident in the corridor wasn't isolated. I've spoken with others who felt cornered and terrified by Professor Gill's behavior.
The dean placed a reassuring hand on the folder of testimonies.
Maria, your bravery is inspiring. I promise you, every story is being carefully recorded. Together, we will ensure that no one else endures such treatment.
Another student, Alexis, then approached, her voice trembling but resolute.
Dean, I was scared to speak up before. But after what happened to Cindy, I realized silence only makes us more vulnerable. I remember Professor Gill saying, I know what it takes to make a woman succeed, if only you'd listen to me. I now see those words were a thinly veiled threat.
The dean responded firmly.
Thank you, Alexis. Your courage is commendable. Let me be clear. This campus is a safe space. We will not tolerate behavior that endangers your well-being or violates your trust.
Over the course of the investigation, the flood of testimonies from Ms. Johnson, Ms. Ramirez, Maria, Lisa, Alexis, and many others painted a clear picture of a pattern of misconduct. The evidence was overwhelming. The dean's firm insistence on transparency and accountability had sparked a movement among staff and students alike. In a final campus meeting convened by the dean, the atmosphere was one of resolute unity. The dean addressing the assembly one last time.
Thank you all for your courage and commitment. I am proud to announce that, following our thorough investigation, Professor Gill has been dismissed, and a formal criminal case has been initiated. This decision is a testament to what we can achieve when we stand together. Now, let this be a turning point. No one on this campus will be silenced or sidelined when their safety is at stake.
The room filled with murmurs of relief and cautious hope. For Cindy, Maria, and every person who had spoken up, this was not just the end of an ordeal. It was the beginning of a future defined by justice and respect. After the final campus meeting, while hope still buzzed in the air, my parents and I requested a private meeting with the dean. We walked down the quiet corridor until we reached his office. With a firm, yet compassionate handshake, he greeted us.
Thank you for coming. I know these have been challenging days.
My father spoke first.
Dean, we need to know what happens next for my daughter's academic future.
The dean motioned for us to sit and explained.
Mr. Albert, let me be clear. Professor Gill has been dismissed once and for all. Furthermore, we are overhauling our recruitment processes. Every new staff member will undergo thorough background checks, and yearly reviews will ensure that our policies of truth and protection remain uncompromised.
And what about Cindy? Her poor performance wasn't due to a lack of effort. It was the result of a traumatic ordeal that shook her to the core.
The dean's eyes softened as he turned to me.
Cindy, your bravery in coming forward has not only exposed the truth, but also catalyzed change here at Columbia. As a token of our commitment to you, I'm offering you the opportunity to resit your exams. Moreover, if you succeed in these exams, you will be granted a full scholarship to continue your studies here. We refuse to let this injustice define your future.
My voice wavered with relief and lingering apprehension as I replied, "Thank you, Dean. I was so scared I wouldn't be able to bounce back. This means more to me than I can say." My father, his stern features softening with pride, said,
We are grateful for your decisive action, Dean. Knowing that a policy of truth and protection now reigns here gives us hope that no other student will suffer like she did. Rest assured, we will support you every step of the way. Prepare for your resit exams without the burden of these past events. Columbia is committed to being a safe, nurturing environment for every student and staff member.
In the following weeks, I immersed myself in study. Late into the night, I pored over textbooks and notes, determined to reclaim my future. One evening, as I reviewed my materials, my mother peeked in and said softly,
Cindy, your strength amazes me every day. I know you're anxious, but remember, you are capable of extraordinary things.
My father joined with a proud smile.
You've overcome so much already, sweetheart. I believe in you, and no matter the results, you've made us immensely proud.
The day of my resit exams finally arrived. With trembling hands and a racing heart, I took my seat, determined to do my best. A few days later, when the results were announced, I read my scores and couldn't help but smile in disbelief and triumph. I did it! I passed all my exams with flying colors. At that moment, my parents rushed to my side. My mother enveloped me in a warm embrace, and my father's eyes shone with pride as he said,
Oh, Cindy, we're so proud of you. Your hard work and courage have paid off.
My father added, voice thick with emotion.
This is just the beginning of a new chapter. You've not only excelled academically, but helped change our community for the better. I couldn't be prouder.
In that moment, as I celebrated my success with my family, and as Columbia began to heal, I felt a renewed spirit of justice and commitment, a promise that every voice would be heard and every student would be protected in the years to come. My name is Cindy, and this is my story, a journey from betrayal and despair to hope, resilience and triumph. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.